Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 155 of the Kiss Army Nation podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Pasquale Veri.
And I am Claudius Pera. Welcome to the show, everyone.
All right, guys, listen, you know me, right? I love Kiss, and I love Kiss-related books. Release of Louder Than Words, Beyond the Backstage Pass, I had to have it, and I had to get to know its author. So here he is, guitarist, rock journalist, and the author of both Backstage Pass, The Grit and the Glamour, and his newly released book, Louder Than Words, Beyond the Backstage Pass, Joe Matera. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Pasquale, and thank you, Claudia, for having me on your wonderful show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, my friend.
It's a pleasure.
And first off, we wanted to congratulate you on your new book. So, of course, we're going to discuss your books. But before we do that, we would like to get to know you a bit better. So let's begin with Joe the musician. So you are a guitarist in the Swedish rock band Rough Rockers, as well as a solo artist releasing instrumental albums and playing guitar on various records around the world. So tell us, what are your musical influences and how does Kiss fit into that?
Okay, excellent. All right, so first of all, yes, I've been basically first and foremost, I'm a musician. I've been playing guitar since the age of 15. A lot of my influences are basically the classic rock sort of influences. Kiss is part of it. Ace Frehley is one of my guitar sort of influences. Learning all those sort of pentatonic licks that he did on those classic albums. So that's how the Kiss stuff comes into it. But yeah, in bands, I've played in quite a few bands over the years. Rough Rockers is actually the Swedish band. Well, I was a member because the band's no longer. What happened was I joined the band in 2018 and we signed a deal with a Dutch label called RVP Records. And we recorded and released a EP, both on vinyl and CD, called Smoke and Mirrors. It was mixed by legendary Swedish producer Thomas Skogsberg, who many people will know. He's sort of the godfather of death metal, Swedish death metal. He's done Backyard Babies, Entombed, Helicopters. So he mixed that, and we had a special guest on one of the tracks, Graham Bonnet from Rainbow. He sings on one of the tracks called Unleash the Beast. Now, the interesting thing about Rough Rockers is when they were mostly a metal band. When I joined, I sort of polished up a bit the sound because my influence is much more classic rock, sort of pop rock, sort of melody style. I sort of made it much more radio friendly. So there's one side which is all basically, you can say the Joe Matera side, which is all sort of much more hard rock, sort of melodic guitar. And there's the other side, which is the other guitar player's side, Magnus, which is much more heavy metal, fast sort of shredding. So yeah, it's a great look. It's a great album. Came out 2019. I went over to Sweden to do some shows. But unfortunately, when I got back, sadly, the bass player and the main person in the band, Peter, passed away. So that band's now sort of no longer together, which is sad because we had quite a few pieces of music we're going to record for the next album. But look, it was a great time and a great band. And as for my solo stuff, I basically tour Europe fairly regularly, playing my own sort of music, which is sort of rock-based, and, songs and instrumentals. So that's sort of my musical background. And music journalism, basically, yeah, I write for a lot of the guitar magazines and music magazines across the globe.
Okay.
And and your question was, how did Kiss come into it? As I mentioned, Ace Frehley was the sort of one of the guitar players who influenced my guitar playing. And obviously in Australia, Kiss were huge, especially 1979, 1980 with Dynasty album and Unmasked. So obviously that played a huge part in becoming a fan too.
Okay. And being a fan of Ace, were you the kind of guitarist that basically followed Jimmy Page and that kind of stuff, and Jeff Beck? So what other guitarists are your main influences besides Ace?
One of my other main influences is Hank Marvin from the Shadows, which, he's a very influential, legendary English guitar player who influenced a lot of those early guitar players like Jeff Beck and Richie Blackmore. So, they did a lot of that sort of early 60s surfy instrumental stuff. So Hank Marvin, look, Jimmy Page is not influenced. Dave Gilmour from Pink Floyd, I really love his stuff. Wow. So look, it's really hard to sort of define exactly who is my main influence, because I have so much diversity in my music taste. So I can listen to new wave, I can listen to punk, I can listen to even country music, and he's something that inspires me. So guitar influences are pretty much varied, but those guys I've mentioned are probably up there at the top.
Okay, okay.
So, Joe, you mentioned that you're into classic rock. And between 2003 and 2008, you were in a band called Double Vision. So tell us about your experiences in that band.
Okay, Double Vision was a band I formed, which played mostly 70s and 80s sort of covers. We even did a couple of Kiss songs too. Look, it was a very successful band. It was a good training ground for me in regards to when I went on and started doing original music, because playing in cover bands, you're sort of playing other people's music, and you sort of tend to sort of it's your approach and what you can bring to it to make it your own. So, we did quite a few gigs, worked together for a few years, and then eventually I just got tired of playing covers and just wanted to go into an original music career. So I just started writing songs, and was lucky to sort of get picked up by a label in Austria who signed me for my very first debut album. And that was released in 2011. So, and ever since then, it's basically been original music for me, and I wear my influences on my sleeve in regards to my music and my guitar playing. So when you hear that, you'll hear a bit of the classic rock there, you hear a bit of Ass Frehley in my playing, you hear a bit of all that. I'm very proud of my influences.
So you're still a solo artist now, correct?
Yes, I'm still that. That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and what are you working on presently?
At the moment, I've got a couple of new pieces of music I'm working on. I'll probably have another new album at some point, but I've been releasing singles at the moment, because it's in the way the music industry is at the moment. It's pretty it's not in a good state in regards to streaming. I mean, you've got to basically put your music out there in digital platforms for people to hear it. Touring is one form of where you can actually make some money by selling merchandise and by selling CDs. So there's quite a few different things I'm working on. I'm always working on new music. So I've just finished a track with Thomas again, because Thomas has been my co-producer on most of my material I've released since 2018. And I've also worked with, I have to mention this too, speaking of classic rock, Don Powell from the band Slade. He actually plays drums in one of my tracks called Inside Looking Out, which came out a couple of years ago, which is a sort of a very heavy sort of track, so people can check that out on Spotify. But Thomas is a great producer to work with, and his input is absolutely valuable. And we just sort of teamed up, and anything I do now, I just sort of put it to Thomas, and he'll say, yep, try this, and keep working on the music. And so I've got more music coming anyway.
Nice.
Okay, nice. And Joe, of course, for a versatile artist like yourself, and you mentioned that previously, some minutes ago, playing guitar is not enough. So you're also a rock journalist, and up to what we know now, so you have published over 600 articles since 1999, and you're presently writing for Guitar World, Guitar Player, and Goldmine. So how did you get into rock journalism?
That's interesting. I sort of fell into it. I was on the internet very early on when it sort of started coming out. I was around about 1993, so it was very in its infancy. And I've always sort of been a passionate fan of music. I've always used to go to the music websites and that sort of stuff. And I've always liked writing. But the thing is, one of my subjects at school I really loved was English, which is all about writing. And now when you write music, it's the same thing too. So it's just one form of writing that goes into another angle. So I'm lucky to be able to do both, because being a musician in today's world is very hard to sort of make a living totally from playing music. So having both combinations allows me to earn a living from both, which is fantastic. And I get to meet a lot of my heroes and write about them, and I love sharing stories with readers and fans. So so I've been doing the journalism now since 1999, and I've done probably I know Wikipedia says 600 articles. I've probably done a lot more than that now, and I still do. So, but there've been so many interviews, and I'm just glad that I've list them all because if people ask me, who have you interviewed, I usually go blank. I go because I've done so many, and it's only when I look at my list I go, oh yeah, I remember I've interviewed him. So but yeah, and it's great. It's a great how can I say? It's a great hobby to do to make a living from anyway.
Of course. And speaking of big stars that actually you interviewed. So I know that we know that you interviewed actually the members of Kiss. So
Yes.
who did you interview, and what was your experience like?
Okay. I go obviously really in depth about that in my new book, Louder Than Words. So there's a whole chapter about Kiss and my take on things, and I explain. Yep, that's right, Louder Than Words. I explain my love for Kiss and what they mean to me and what they mean in general, and I also talk about when I've interviewed them and what it was like. So, starting my very first interview with one of the members of Kiss was Gene Simmons in 2002. And he was doing interviews, promotion for his book that's coming out that year. And one of the things about Gene was really interesting because I've been one of the first members of Kiss I got to interview. It was sort of a bit of a letdown in the sense that Kiss Gene was very much business. Everything was business oriented. He tried to sell you whatever, which is that's Gene. And but when I read his book, and there was a lot of facts in it that weren't right, and I thought I wanted to sort of mention it to him and clear the air with him, and he was very much irritated by my fact,
Okay.
because one of the things I mentioned to him was in his book he stated that in 1980 Kiss took Bon Jovi on their first UK tour, all right. And I said to Gene, well, Bon Jovi wasn't even formed to 1984, and it wasn't Bon Jovi, it was Iron Maiden. And there was a pause on the phone line, and he sort of just got back to me and he said, look, it wasn't a statistical, story I wanted to write about. It was much, much more a stream of consciousness, I wanted to write a story about how a young boy from Israel went to the promised land and became a big rock star. So he sort of, took it in that direction, and just sort of said, well, facts weren't important to him. It was about more the story, which, I get it. But being a Kiss fan, it's like, well, you can't write something that's not true, like Bon Jovi weren't formed in 1980. So, but yeah, that sort of irritated them a bit. But, that's fine. That's cool. Then my next one was Bruce Kulick. I got to meet Bruce. He was out in Australia. Got to meet him a few times. Lovely guy, absolutely wonderful, down to earth human being. So we had a bit of a chat and talked about Kiss and about his own music, and and look back on his time with the band. The next interview I did was Ace Frehley, which was fantastic. Being a hero, I mean, it was like, wow, I finally got to talk to one of my guitar heroes, and like he was funny, absolutely. He's got that laughter. As you've seen in interviews, it's just sort of infectious laughter, And when I asked him about, what his memories of Australia was in 1980, he just laughed and he says, "Rock and roll, baby." And then the next one was Tommy. I asked, it was around about when they released the Monster album. So what's that, around about 2011, roughly? And it was a great chat. I mentioned to him that I thought Monster was a how can I say? It was a mixture of Destroyer and Revenge album. I thought it sounded I really loved the album. And he said to me, "Well, I'm glad that you think that, but I just think it's just a great album in general." So, he was great. And then I got to talk to Ace again, which was fantastic. Again, same thing, infectious laughter. I'm trying to think who else now. Oh, and then I tell a story about Peter Criss, where I got to sort of perform at the Kiss convention in Australia in 2017, and got to play on the bill along with other bands. I got to sort of play a set of Kiss covers done in my own style, which was really interesting. It got me really thinking, because I came out with an acoustic guitar and I just sort of acoustified everything. 6 classic Kiss tracks, all done in Joe Matera's acoustic style. So it was great. It was a challenge, singing some of those songs, but in my own style, it was fine. So, but yeah, and that's what it's been. And then I actually interviewed Ace again just a couple months ago for his new album.
Oh, for 10,000 volts.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mm.
nice.
yeah. So it was fantastic. So yeah, it's been great. So over 20 years, I've done quite a few Kiss members. Apart from Paul Stanley, he's the only one I haven't spoken to yet.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm curious because besides Kiss, you interviewed Bon Jovi, members of Iron Maiden, Foo Fighters, Metallica, to name a few. So even with Kiss, what kind of approach or angle do you take when you're interviewing such megastars?
Look, because I'm a musician, a lot of them pick up on that straight away, you know, because I approach it from a musical point of view. I never come in, you know, wanting the tabloid headline. I'm never interested, you know, like
Mm.
I don't care about sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's about the music. So I'm a music fan. So I approach it from a fan base as well as from a musician. So as soon as they know I'm a musician, it's incredible how they open up to you because they know that you're not some idiot who's going to ask some stupid questions. So
Right.
and I research my questions really well. You know, I spend a lot of time, and you know, I had some experiences with some rock stars that really bring out the best in you. For example, when I interviewed Lemmy from Motorhead, I was warned quite a few times by other journalists that to watch out because he didn't, take journalists, how do I kind of say, pretty much, how can I say, he didn't suffer fools gladly. He if he didn't like you, he'll let you know. So
Mm.
I made sure I researched me questions, and when I interviewed him, he put me through my paces, really put me through my paces. But I came through, and then at the end, he was so impressed. He said to me, "That was one hell of a good interview." And because of that, you're going to come and meet me backstage when I'm in Melbourne. And I did. And he invited me and
Wow.
we got to meet. And
Wow.
you'll read all about that in my first book, Backstage Pass. So truly a great rock star and gentleman. So, when you've interviewed someone like that, everybody else is easy, really. So, but yeah, look, it's important to know your stuff. It's important to treat them with respect and just to treat them as musicians as they are. And I've developed a good rapport with a lot of them where they'll ask for me again. Oh, can we talk to Joe Matera again? Because they know they can trust me, and that's important. It's a trust.
Yeah.
And being a journalist, I mean, there's some journalists who, yeah, as you know, a lot of artists will go, we don't want to talk to them because they're basically taking what they've said out of context. So
Yeah.
I always make sure that everything is within context. It's what they've said, and it's about the music and it's about them.
Hmm. And do you have like a fantasy interview, someone that you haven't interviewed and would love to interview?
Yes, definitely. Dave Gilmour, he's a hard one. Dave
Mm.
Gilmour doesn't do many interviews, and when he does, it's very, very maybe like one or two. So he's probably one of my fantasy interviews, and obviously Jimmy Page. The closest I came to Jimmy Page was basically uh, visiting his house. I was in London one year, and I found out when he lived. And I just went past his house and saw where Jimmy was, and I thought, I wonder if he's home. But I thought, no, I'm not gonna. I wasn't game enough to sort of knock on the front door. So, but that's the closest I got to Jimmy.
Joe, we mentioned before, your main thing. You have to define yourself as a musician, but then, of course, you walk us through your experience as a journalist, and as this is not enough. You're also an author, right? So, do you see writing books as a natural progression from rock journalism?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it wasn't something that was planned. It's something that just came. It's actually happened. I mean, first book happened because of the pandemic. I couldn't tour anymore. I was going to Europe every year, and then suddenly, I couldn't tour like everybody else couldn't. It came to a stop. So I went back into doing journalism full time in order to make a living. So, and everyone kept saying to me over the years, you should write a book. And I go, nah, who's going to be interested in the book? They got too many stories. And
Uh-huh.
when the pandemic happened, I had so much time on my hands. I thought, maybe I'll start writing something now. And I just started doing a bit every day. And eventually, I wrote a couple of chapters and I thought, oh, this might lead to something. So I thought, but is anybody interested? So I sent it to a couple of publishers and one in particular in England said to me, we really like what you're doing. Stick at it. And if it's, once it's finished, send it to us and we'll have a look at it. So I eventually finished it, sent it to them. They loved it. And they go, this is really unique. It comes from a position where not many other writers do, which is, being a musician, being on tour with
Yeah.
the actual musicians and
Yeah.
writing from experiences, and also doing interview stuff in hotel rooms. And so, yeah, they published it, and that sort of got me going where now, this next book was, again, a natural progression where I go, well, there's been a lot of interest. People enjoyed my first book. I'll write another one, but I wanted to go in a different direction. This one, which is talks more about the artists that influenced me, how they shaped my life, and what they mean to me. And then also talk about their lives and their music, and and there's a lot of great stories in this one too. So I'm really pleased with this effort.
Super. Well, you basically, you gave us an answer to the following question, but I just wanted to stress the fact that both your books, Backstage Pass, The Grit and the Glamour, and Louder Than Words, Beyond the Backstage Pass, are in some way autobiographical. Okay, so focusing on your experiences in the rock world. So, but also your books are more than just anecdotes and stories. They are really insightful. Okay, so what is the message that you wanted to get across with these books? So why not only concentrating on your stories and anecdotes? Why going deeper?
Because for example, there's a chapter that I did on Billy Squire. Now, one thing I'm always about is as I said earlier about the facts, I want to dispel a lot of myths about stories, because sometimes things get way out of hand that's got nothing to do with the truth, And I know rock and roll is based a lot of times on myth making, but I wanted to show the human side of what it's like to be a musician, to be an artist, to explain the music, what get behind the music. So now with the Billy Squire thing, everybody knows the story that supposedly the video he did for Rock Me Tonight ruined his career. We never heard from Billy Squire ever again, and that's the reason why we don't. Now, that is not totally true. That is probably just a tiny part of it to a complete bigger picture, which I go into in great detail, because I interviewed Billy for the chapter. We spent many hours talking about it. He gave me his full story about what really happened. I spoke to a lot of people involved in the whole drama, like MTV VJs, players who worked with Billy. And there's a lot more story to why Billy actually quit the industry. It had nothing to do with the video. And actually that track, Rock Me Tonight, was one of his biggest hits compared to, say, The Strokes. So that video was just a scapegoat for people not understanding that there was a lot more. Not only that, I also explained that another reason why probably people didn't like that video was because Billy was ahead of his time. Now, in that video, you'll see him sort of doing a lot more sort of feminine type stuff, which was, back then, this is pre-AIDS, right? And it was a culture very much homophobia. So that played into it a fair bit. Queen suffered because of that in America, as we know, and Billy talks about it in the book too, how he was on tour and, because of Queen's video for I Want to Break Free, it didn't go down well with America, so, MTV. So that sort of didn't help too. But in that video, Billy is ahead of his time, because a few years down the track, the Sunset Strip bands, like Motley Crue, Poison, they were wearing all this sort of feminine stuff, all the makeup. Not only that, Billy had a pink guitar, which people said in that video, oh, pink guitar by Billy. Well, the Shredders had pink guitars, later on in the late 80s. I had a pink guitar, like a BC Rich, which was, a heavy metal guitar. So I think just Billy was ahead of his time, and I think he was too early for that. But and then there's also a lot of record label politics involved, which later on was the reason why he quit the industry, because it's a pretty dog-eat-dog world in this industry. So you've got to be pretty tough to sort of survive. So, I just wanted to get to the truth, show the human side, the music side, and and hopefully people enjoy and get something from it. And like you said earlier, very insightful, that they're going to learn new things about their favorite artists and about the music.
Yeah, having more information. That's great.
Now, your latest book is sort of like a sequel to Backstage Pass, focusing on the artists who influenced you and shaped your life. So I'm curious, because talking with these artists, do you feel that after having talked with them and learning these stories, you have a different outlook on them, either negative or positive?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I've been pretty lucky with a lot of artists that they've been pretty great people to talk to. I sort of, because I'm a musician, I sort of know their mindset. I understand it, you know. So it's not surprising there. I think in the early days, one of the biggest surprises for me, because, you know, growing up, you hear, for example, you know, some artist got a #1 record and you go, well, they must be filthy rich. And that's further from the truth than you can ever get, because I spoke to artists that, for example, had 2, you know, #1 albums, were really successful, and yet they were broke. They were absolutely working day jobs, you know. And I just thought, how could this be? And it's only later on, when I got to, you know, do more interviews and got to know more about the industry, that it really showed that the perception is totally different to what really goes on, which is part of what the idea of my books are, is what you see on stage and what you get in the public is totally different to what really goes on. There's hard work, there's sacrifices, there's dedication, there's money involved. There's a lot of stuff for fans that they don't get to see. So that was really surprising. But most of the other stuff, you know, like I said, being a musician, I know what's involved. I know what it's like to be on tour. It's not a you know, glamorous life. You know, it might be for when you know, if a young band, when you first start now and you go on your first tour, it's a really great experience. But once you've done 2 or 3 tours and you see, especially when you start getting really much more successful, you start to realize it's almost like a sausage making machine in one way. It's the same thing every day.
Right.
You sort of go, how do I get away from this? You know, like, which is why a lot of artists end up, you know, drinking or trying to do something while they're on tour, because it's not an easy life. It's really hard. You've got to be really dedicated to your music and really wanting to do it. And if you're passionate about your music, no matter what happens, you're doing it for the right reasons.
Right,
And there's also a whole business, you know, behind musicians. So you have to keep the machine going. So you become
absolutely
you become a product, right? Yeah,
absolutely. You are a product. I mean, unfortunately, that's, if you want to be successful in anything, you know, nowadays, as I say, you're a brand, you're a product, and what you're selling is you're selling yourself, you're selling your music. But you know, if you want to be successful and want a mass audience, that's what you got to do.
Yep.
Now, I'm also sure, talking to these musicians, while you're talking to them or as you're talking to them, you learn a little bit about yourself. So some of the artists that influenced you, what have they taught you about you, the individual, or you, the musician?
That's a really, really good question. I suppose just you learn things, you know, like they tell you things and you go, okay, you know, like, for example, maybe an approach to your stagecraft, or maybe something on your guitar, you know, like, for example, they might, you know, like they might show you one of their songs on guitar and you go, oh, that's how it's played. Now I got played it here. So you always learn something. You know, you might learn something about them, about their album, for example, and you go back and you listen to it and they go, oh, okay, I can see where they're coming from now. So there's always something you can learn, you know, and I think that's important. You never stop learning. You're always learning something new. I mean, you might be the most dedicated fan in the world, but I bet you there's always something that you never know about your favorite artist. And I know that for a fact too, is that, you know, even writing this book, I learned a lot more about my favorite artists too.
And what impact do you think Kiss had on your life and your music?
Oh, look, Kiss, absolutely. I mean, especially in Australia, huge impact, you know, I mean, especially in the late 70s, you know, as a teenager. And I think they taught, one thing I learned from Kiss was to be yourself, to not be afraid what anybody else thinks. Because, you know, I mean, as you know, Kiss got a lot of flack in the early years for what they do, you know, and even through the changes in the 80s they went through. As far as I'm concerned, they just went with you know, they just evolved as a band does, you know, and I think good luck to them. And they approached everything with a business sense, which is why they're still here, you know, 50 years later. It's important to sort of stick to who you are, believe in what you do, and they certainly believe in what they do, and know that your fans are the reason why you can keep doing it, because without your fans, you're nothing. So Kiss will keep doing it as long as fans want it, because they're a great band. And so, yeah, look, huge influence in that sense of working, I suppose, working in the industry and working towards your stagecraft.
You know, one of the things that we love about this interview, Joe, it's you know, this kind of a professional view of the music business, you know, and how you write your books. And on your latest one, you also focus on the difficulties of touring and how touring, you know, it can break up a band, basically, you know, because of different reasons, you know, fatigue, you know, the social isolation and the continuous pressure from the business, to give their best every night. And of course, in your career, you have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So has this tainted your love for music in any way?
No, because as I said earlier, I do it because I love music. It's my calling. No matter what, I'm going to always play music because I love music. So but I've also learned to understand there's a business side to it, and I'm very business savvy in that sense. So I know how to navigate, I suppose, the obstacles that you face, because in order to have a career that, a lifelong career, you've got to be able to understand the industry. If you don't, you're not going to last long. So, and money doesn't motivate me. Obviously, you want to get paid for what you do, but that's not the motivation. The motivation is to be creative with my music or my writing, and to share stories and to share my music. I think that's what it is. It's to connect with other human beings. Like, for example, you bought my books, Pasquale, and that makes me happy because I'm sharing those stories, and I hope you get lots of enjoyment from it. And if you get enjoyment from it and you learn something new about Kiss, for example, my job's done. That inspires me to keep doing it. So that's what it's about. So there is a whole chapter in my new book about one of my European tours I did in 2014, which was 20, I think it was 24 days, 6 countries and 14 shows. And I detailed that tour and how hard it was, but at the same time, it gives you an insight of it was all about work. It was all about traveling. It was all about trying to catch up on sleep. And I interspersed that story with other artists tell me their tour story. For example, Snowy White from Pink Floyd gives me a couple of examples of what it was like to be on tour. Adrian Vandenberg does too. There's quite a few other artists that share their stories. Loverboy. So people get an overall good picture of it. But one of the things that I point out in that chapter is my reward. I was in Prague in Czech Republic for one of my shows, and just to see a McDonald's down the road, to have a McDonald's meal was one of the best highlights of the career, because I could eat something that I enjoyed rather than what I was having the day before, or I was sleeping on my booking agent's lounge room floor for about a week. So it's not this glamorous unless you're in the, obviously, people like Kiss can travel lux because they've earned it, and they've got the money for it. But when you're at a different level, you can't do that. You've got to be able. I mean, it's very expensive to tour, so you got to try and do everything on the budget. And on the budget might mean going without food for a day or something. Who knows? So, but you do it for the love, to get that hour on stage to play your music for those people who enjoy it. Is nothing beats it.
And we talked about this a while ago about Kiss and their 50 years on the road and longevity and all that stuff. You mentioned the fans, but what else do you think that in the case of Kiss, what else happened that these guys, they were able to sustain the machine for 50 years?
I think one of the important things is, as I've stated, Gene, very business savvy, and Paul, very much the master of knowing like the musical side of things. As a team, I mean, Gene and Paul, they are really the machine behind Kiss, and I think they've done a really great job. They've connected with an audience that they understand the fans, and the fans, because of that, the fans understand Kiss too. And I think having a fan base as Kiss have is really, I mean, what band wouldn't want a fan base like Kiss? I mean, after all these years, still be able to sort of, when I did the Kiss convention, see all these fans line up buying all this Kiss merchandise. It's fantastic, I remember Gene once stated in an interview that his goal with Kiss was to, he said, tongue in cheek, to have a religion called Kisstanity. And I think he's achieved that, because it's almost become religion with a lot of people. So, yeah, look, good luck to them. I think they've done a great job, and I think even now with their, about the future, I think they're going to have avatars or something like that, like ABBA have done. I think they're going to They're going to be. I think in 50 years' time, you're still going to see Kiss shows somewhere down the track.
So I want to go back to your book, because your latest book, especially, has been getting some amazing reviews from fans, rave reviews from music magazines. Tell us about some of the feedback your book has been getting.
Look, it's early days still, but the feedback's been really positive. I've been really wrapped in what's been coming out from the press. I mean, there's still more reviews to come.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it's only been out for a couple of weeks now, and but the fans, the ones who've already got them, have read it, have really enjoyed it. They've given me some feedback, and they said it's a great book. They can't wait for my next one. And I go,
Yeah.
well, hold on, let me just enjoy this one here. Right, this, but look, that's great. You know, as I said, they're enjoying it. It's positive, so let's hope it just keeps going.
So with your latest book, were you happy with the final result? Was there anything you could see yourself have done differently?
No, look, I'm happy with it. I think I rewrote. I did a lot of rewriting with the book. I just rewrote it until I was really happy with it. So when I send it off to the publisher, usually a lot of times, publisher will proofread it and they might get you to revise some things, but they were really happy with the final result. So there was no revisions needed. They were just totally, this is good. So, because I spent a lot of work. I mean, it took me about 18 months to write it, and I spent a lot of time on making sure this book was the best I could do. And it's like making a record. You always try and do your next record to be better than the previous record. So, so I'm very happy with the result.
I really hope after this interview that our listeners go out and buy your book, because I think it's a must read. Just listening to your stories here on the show, and this book goes into such more depth into those stories. It's a definite must read. So where can our listeners get a copy of your books?
Okay, it's available on Amazon and any platform Amazon in the country. For example, if you're in Canada, Amazon.ca. If in America, it's Amazon.com. So wherever you are, get it at Amazon. I have to mention Brian Adams did the foreword for my
Yeah.
book, which I was totally honored because Brian is one of my huge influences, really shaped my life. And there's a whole chapter on Brian and my love for his music, and I tell his whole story. And but just to have Brian to endorse the book was just absolutely absolutely fantastic, because he's I don't to my knowledge I don't think he's ever endorsed any other book that's been out on him before or written about him, so that's a huge honor.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, we have a final question before we close the curtain on this episode. So we mentioned before that a band is often defined by its fans, and how important the fans are for the success of a band. So what is your assessment of the Kiss Army?
I think my assessment is in probably two words best described as passionate, dedicated.
Mm-hmm.
Well said.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your future plans. You're doing so much stuff that you don't seem that you're not even closer to stop. So what are you into now?
Look, I like getting busy. I'm just got so much. Like I said, my love for music just spills in everything I do. So more recording. I've got, like I said, music on the way. Writing, I've got a lot of stuff still writing for Guitar Player, Guitar World, Goldmine, Record Collector in the UK, Sound on Sound, which is a recording magazine. So there's quite a lot of work there I love doing. And I also write a fortnightly newspaper column, or actually a music page, for Shepparton News here in Australia, which is a large circulating daily newspaper. So that's I get to sort of do feature stories and share the latest music news in the charts. So so things keep me busy. But and I've got some shows coming up, that sort of stuff. And I have to mention I'm going to go off to the UK at the end of this year. So I haven't been on tour since, like I said, the pandemic. So it's been about 4 years now. Okay. I'm going to go and resume my touring. So I'm going to go off to the UK, and I'm going to do some shows with the band, the Corgis, who, if people don't know who they are, they had a huge worldwide hit in 1980 with a song called Everybody's Gonna Learn Sometime. So they're still around producing new music. I mean, we've co-written some songs and recorded together. So I'm going off to do some shows with them, as well as my own shows. And do some book events, because I've been doing a lot of sort of going to different sort of libraries around the country and talking about my book, and doing mini concerts, and it's going down really well. So just keep busy and keep writing and keep making music.
Any chances that you bring your books and your music to North America, to Canada or the US?
I love to. That's one of my plans. That's the only place I haven't been, is North America, and I love to go there. And hopefully, I'm actually got a record label in America called Renaissance Records. They do all reissues of albums. They actually reissued my first two albums last year, and so they're in North America. So I need to sort of get over there to sort of obviously catch up with them, and so yeah. Look, I love to come to Canada, and so who knows, it may happen. For this year though, I've got the UK, I might look at it next year. We'll see what happens. But definitely look, and if I do, I'll come and see you guys personally.
Oh,
Yes,
absolutely.
yes.
If you ever come to Montreal, you know, this is your home, man. So
Yeah.
you're more
Absolutely.
than welcome.
I want to see your collection, Kiss collection.
Won't disappoint.
I bet it won't.
You know, Joe, you were advertising your latest book in a lot of Kiss groups on Facebook, and it immediately caught my attention, and I want to learn more. And the minute I heard more about this book, I bought it right away. As I mentioned to you, I wrote you right away. You know, congratulations on your book. You want to come on the show? I don't know what it is. It's just like your passion really came through on social media, and you know, you're a person that loves what he does, and that was so clear. And I just had to meet you, had to have you on the show. And my friend, I got to tell you, you did not disappoint.
Oh, thank you. Although that means a lot to me. Look, I am passionate. Yeah, you know, the thing is, I've got it, as you mentioned earlier, being a product, music being a product or book. I mean, it's a product. So I wanted to bring to the attention of the people who will find it interesting, which is why I went to all the Kiss groups, you know, on Facebook, because I thought, well, there's going to be people who probably won't ever get to know there's this book out. So what's the best way to go is to go to the actual fans and bring it to attention. So I'm so glad, you know, you saw it and you bought it, and I'm really rapt that you asked me to be on your great show, because it's such a pleasure. And I'm glad that my passion comes through, because that's all it is. I want people to know. I want the whole world to know. Check out this book. You know, I want to share my love for these bands I talk about with others. Because I'll tell you one thing. There's another guy I spoke to recently who had a podcast, and he said to me, he read my book, and on my Bryan Adams chapter, I talk about an album of his called Into the Fire, right, which is sort of the follow-up to Reckless. And compared to Reckless, it only sold about 2 million copies, right? It was sort of overlooked a lot. And I explained why that album should not be overlooked, I think. And I went through the whole thing about why it's a great album, and I was passionate about it. And he said, after he read my analysis of it, he went back to listen to the album, and it brought him a renewed love for it. In the end, he realized it is a great album. So I thought, fantastic. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
People read my Kiss chapter, they might read something, they go, I want to find out why, you know, and this is,
right.
And they go back to it, or read something about, you know, Billy Squire, for example, go, I want to revisit his albums. They go, wow, this is fantastic. I overlooked this all these years ago. So that's my goal with what I want to do with the book.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know what? I didn't have the chance to get the books yet, but you know, they're on the top of my list now. So, and even more, you know, after listening to this beautiful interview with you. So it's been a true pleasure, Joe. So we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your interest, actually. And I'm so happy to talk to you guys. And look, hopefully all the Kiss fans out there will also check out the book and enjoy it. And and look, as you mentioned, Pasquale, I'm very accessible on social media, so anybody can email me or message me. And as I said earlier, you mentioned about Kiss fans, and I think it's important to understand that it's fans that keep you doing what you're doing. So you've got to be accessible. I'm not one of these guys, if someone writes me a message, I ignore it. It's like, they took the time to write to me. I've got to take the time to respond to them because they showed interest in something, which is what like you did. So, and I think that's very important to keep that. And I think that's the beauty of social media these days. You can actually connect with the actual artist directly, you know. Back in the day, you had to go through all sorts of channels, and you might get a letter, but you don't know if that letter was actually written by the artist, you know. So yeah, it's wonderful. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Genuine pleasure. Thank you. So to the Kiss Army, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please send them to talktome@kissarmynationpodcast.com. Until the next time, remember, never stop rocking. Take care, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and X. You can watch us on YouTube or listen to us on Podomatic, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. This is about you, so please like and subscribe to support the amazing guests we have on the show. See you soon, Kiss Army.